All right, our passage today is found in the book of Romans. We're going to take a break next week so that we can actually celebrate Palm Sunday and Easter. Though we could probably be in the book of Romans for Easter because it's all about what Christ has done for us. But we are in Romans chapter 3. We're going to be finishing up chapter 3 today, and I actually have the Pew Bible here today instead of the Bible I've been using. Sarah's like, "Did you lose it?" I said, "No, the Bible I use at church, I leave at church." So it's here at the podium. But it's found on page 1490 of your Pew Bibles. There's a note in the Pew Bibles that I'm going to be using. That's where I have the Pew Bible. So, and I do my studying from the New King James I have at home. So, and half the time we just use our phones and the computers to look things up too. So it's a really weird world because, I was brought up, if your Bible doesn't have all this worn out and falling apart, well, my phone's falling apart, so does that mean it? But we've been talking about Romans chapter 3, and we've been talking about all of Romans, and up until this point, it's been really kind of heavy, right? Kind of all about, you're a sinner, I'm a sinner, we're a sinner, we're all sinners, and it's not okay, right? It's not you're a sinner, I'm a sinner, it's all okay. No, it's not okay, right? That the whole universe kind of tells us and points to us that there is a righteousness of God. God has a law, and we have all failed to fulfill it. We all screw up. We all make mistakes. I've been picking on the one about being disobedient to parents because that's the really easy one for us to acknowledge. But the truth is that we hit a lot more categories than just that one in breaking God's law. I got my son to pay attention now. He's like, I got my attention. He said disobedience to parent, right? But we are at this point in Romans chapter 3, we are taking a turn. All right, Paul is going to be leaving behind, well, not really leaving behind, but he's going to be moving on from just that we're sinners, but now here's what God has done because we're all sinners. So let's look at Romans chapter 3, verses 21 to the end. But now a righteousness from God apart from the law has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness from God comes through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. God presented him a sacrifice of atonement through faith in his blood. He did this to demonstrate his justice, because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his justice at the present time, so as to be just and the one who justifies the man who has faith in Jesus. Where then is boasting? It is excluded. On what principle? On that of observing the law? No, but on that of faith. For we maintain that a man is justified by faith apart from observing the law. Is God the God of Jews only? Is he not the God of Gentiles too? Yes, of Gentiles too. Since there is only one God who will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through the same faith, do we then nullify the law by this faith? Not at all. Rather, we uphold the law. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and we'll break it apart. But one of the first things I want us to draw our attention to is Paul has been, in the last 3 chapters, been trying to point out that we are all the same. And you think, yeah, well, we kind of got that, Paul. You said that. We got that. It's okay. He says it over and over and over again. But the reality is, as we look at our world today, we still need to hear that lesson, right? We still need to hear, we're all the same. It's not Gentiles and Jews. It's not white people and black people. It's not rich and poor. It's not man and woman. It's not... We're all the same when it comes to our relationship to Christ. When it comes to our relationship with God, we're all the same. There's one God. and we are the people. Right? And so Daniel keeps asking, wait a minute, what does this talk about race? Aren't we just the human race? Well, that's the way God says it. Yeah. We're the human race. And we need to be reminded of this over and over and over again. And so, as one race, there is one way to heaven. There is one way. And so he starts out in verse 21. We see a righteousness from God that's apart from the law. Right? Because we've established that the law cannot get us to heaven. That, I shouldn't say it that way. Our observance of the law cannot get us to heaven. Right? That's the right way to say that. That there is a righteousness that we see from God that is separate from our ability to observe God's commandments. Because let's face it, when there was one commandment, do not eat of the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, that tree there in the middle of the garden, we couldn't keep the law. Right? When we break the law down into 10 steps, those 10 commandments, we for some reason cannot keep the law. When we get to the New Testament, Jesus breaks it down to it's 2 commandments, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And love your neighbor as you would love yourself, right? We can't keep the law. And so there is a righteousness that we see from God that is separate from our ability to keep the law. And he says, look, this righteousness, it's been there the whole time. And he says, it has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. The law and the prophets, when you see that phrasing, they're saying the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures. And it's really kind of the entirety of them. The law and the prophets. So all of the Old Testament testifies to this righteousness that we see from God that is apart from the law. That is apart from our ability to do what God says. On Wednesday nights, the ministerium have been going through Psalm 51. And we've been noting that this is David making a repentance for what he has done with Bathsheba and Uriah. And in the end, David says, you know what? You don't want all these sacrifices. You don't want all this stuff. You want a broken and contrite heart. Or, as we were told this past Wednesday, a repentant heart. Right? So it's been testified. Even in the Psalms, it points to this. As we're coming up to Palm Sunday, one of the greatest Psalms that we have that associate with Palm Sunday is Psalm 22. It testified of Christ being paraded in as the offering, being hung on the cross as the offering. All of it testifies. You could go back to Genesis chapter 3. There was a promise that was given, right? He says that the snake is going to be cursed. It has to crawl on its belly, and that the woman's seed would crush the head of the snake's seed. That happened on the cross. It was the promise of Christ. It was testified all the way back then, and we see it all the way through. The Rock of Ages. We just talked about that, right? It's there. All the way through we find Christ being testified of in the Old Testament. It's been there the whole time. This is the point. And so this righteousness from God that the Old Testament talks about, because we can't keep the law, it comes through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. Right? So we become righteous when we accept Christ through faith. Right? I like that illustration of the butterfly. That was a good one. Because when we become Christians, we do become something new. We become clean. We become righteous. I like to say, all of us have sinned, but I'm not a sinner. You go, well, wait a minute. I thought you've been saying that we all sin. Because I'm a saint, right? When I came to know Christ, I became a saint. When you came to know Christ, you became a saint. God doesn't see you as a sinner anymore. He sees you as a saint. Or to give one of Jesus' parables, you were a goat, and then you became a sheep. And to quote Cake, they're a music band, sheep go to heaven, goats go to hell. My Jewish friend was playing that song for me. I'm like, you do know that was Jesus, right? He's like, what do you mean? That was Jesus. He said that. That my people are the sheep on this side, and the goats are on this side, and the goats go to hell, and the sheep go to heaven. And before we came to know Christ, we were the goat. Now we're the sheep. And I know my wife is heartbroken by this because she loves goats, and she misses goats. But take it up with God when you get there, okay? The righteousness from God comes through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. Believe is an interesting word. There's that verse in James that says, even the demons believe and they shudder. Right? So we can take believe as that surface level. Yeah, I have acknowledgement that God exists. And yeah, that I believe that stuff's true and all, but... And it's that but that really kind of kicks us. That but kicks us in the butt. Right? Belief isn't just that acknowledgement, that acceptance that this is true, but it's more of the I believe in you, I believe, so I'm going to do what you tell me to do. I believe, so I will obey. We have this policy in our house. If Dad says if you do this, and if you do this, this is what's going to happen if you do this. And what the policy is in our house, if we say that, whatever you say is going to happen has to happen. Right? So, for instance, if you don't pick up your toys, I'm going to throw them out. Right? And so I start picking up the toys and throwing them out if they don't pick them up by the time I told them to. It gets the girls moving real quick when I get the trash bag, and they start realizing, oh, Dad is going to throw them out. Right? And mostly because if they don't pick them up, I'm going to step on them and break them, and not on purpose, but because they scatter them all over the place so you can't see them. Right? If you do this, there was a night, we do it with the pleasantries too. If you do this, I will give you $1. Right? I think my favorite one of that was Daniel, when he was about 2 or 3, lost his blankie. He couldn't sleep without his blankie. He needed his blankie. Daniel, if you find your blankie, we'll give you $1. Daniel walks over, and it had been missing for 2 or 3 days. He walks over to his toy. He opens the toy up, pulls his blankie out, brings his blankie to us. We gave him $1. He held his blankie ransom. But you know what? We want our children to believe us. To hear, Dad says this, that means this will happen. So I will act in accordance. And so when the Bible tells us that the righteousness from God comes through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe, that belief is a belief that pushes us to action. It is a belief that determines our mindset, our worldviews, and how we behave within the world. Right? And so righteousness comes through that faith that James talks about, that faith that produces fruit, that produces action. Because James would say faith without deeds is dead. That's not really faith. That's not really belief. Right? He again goes back to that. There is no difference, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Jesus Christ. Right? And there's a nice, strong theological term there. There are actually two in verse 24. justified. You know, I'm told that this is an economical term. That is when you take your ledger, your book, and you make it so that everything comes out black, right? You balance out your spending out to your spending in, and so that things come out so that you're not in debt. I'm told this because I don't actually balance my books. Sarah does that because I'd live my life in the red because I would never pay. I have a hard time paying attention. That's why in our house, when there are major purchases that need to happen, it's, hey Sarah, can we do this? And she's often she has the words of wisdom going, no Gary, we cannot do that, right? She makes sure that our books stay justified. All right? In the theological sense, we have committed sin, and therefore we have a debt that we owe. And what it's saying is that Jesus comes and he takes that debt we owe and he justifies it, putting us back into the black. All right? He paid our sin debt. There's a second theological word in there, a really nice one. It's called redemption. All right? Redemption. The Greek that is translated as redemption, literally it means to pay a ransom. To pay a ransom. Now there is a lot of theological discussion on who God is paying the ransom to, and I think that it really comes down to he's paying it to his own nature. And we'll get to that in a moment. But the reality is that God has paid for us. In our modern sense, we think of redemption in the sense of it takes something that didn't have worth and gives it worth. Right? I like the soda cans because we take them to the Redemption Center, right? And you know, you got that aluminum can that really it's a piece of garbage. We're not going to do anything with it. So they take and they give us 5 cents. Granted, we already put the 5 cents into the bank and all that stuff. Stupid fly. But really, God gives us worth through grace. Grace is that unmerited favor sort of a thing. When we're given more than what we deserve. It's the flip side to mercy. Mercy is that idea where we're not getting the punishment we deserve. Grace is when we get the added benefits that we didn't deserve. Right? So grace, we're given this redemption through Jesus Christ, which God has presented him as a sacrifice of atonement. And you'll notice if you're reading along in the Pew Bibles that it has a little H there. And then if you go down to that H, it says, or as the one who would turn aside his wrath, taking away sin. All right? If we were reading in something other than the New King James, it would say that God gave him as a propitiation. So the Greek word that's used there is a word that is used to talk about giving sacrifice to a deity to appease the wrath of the deity. All right? That's not how they translate it in the New Testament, and it's not how certain sects of Christianity see it, because they don't believe that there's a wrath of God. But again, like we have pointed out, in Romans chapter 1 and Romans chapter 2, they talk about the wrath of God. And they use that exact word, the wrath of God, right? And so the idea really is that Jesus is given to appease the wrath that God has against our sin. And the reason why the NIV translates it as giving him as a sacrifice of atonement is because that word is also used to talk about the sacrifice, not just the act of giving the sacrifice. And so it's a complicated word. It's also used to talk about the place in which the sacrifice is given. All right? And so we could also look at this as God presented him as the mercy seat. Right? God presented Christ as the mercy seat. He gives us mercy. He fulfills God's wrath. He acts as our atonement through faith in his blood. Do you trust in the blood? You know, Christianity, we get that. We're a bloody religion. You know, we don't actually go out and kill the goats. We don't do all that. But we talk about the blood all the time. Because it was in the blood. It was a blood that needed to pay the debt. In the blood of a man is the life of a man. That's from the Old Testament. He did this. He became the sacrifice to demonstrate his justice. Right? This is where we kind of get a little like, what is he saying? He did this to demonstrate his justice because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his justice at the present time. Right? You see, this is why we say that God can pay a ransom back to his own nature. Because God is just. Right? And in order for God to be just, when he says this is the punishment for this, that punishment must be delivered for this. Right? If he didn't do that, he would be unjust. Because then, well, you're kind of arbitrary in what you're doing. You know, it'd be one of those, if a teacher said, hey, look, this is the punishment for wearing your hat, and one kid comes in and you go, all right, well, you're wearing your hat, so here's your punishment. And then another kid comes in, well, I like you, so you can wear your hat. And you don't give the punishment out. That's not justice, right? Justice is when everybody gets what we said is the punishment for this, right? And so God became He became the sacrifice. He became the propitiation so that he could give the punishment. The punishment had to be paid. And in his justice, he offers that his payment for the punishment to everybody. But it's something that we have to receive. We have to be willing to say, yes, Lord, I will take you up on that offer. Yesterday, I was coming home from my EAS test, and I stopped at McDonald's to get some lunch because I wasn't actually going home. I was going off to some other place. And so I stopped to get some lunch, and they have these new crispy chickens that kind of like Chick-fil-A, but not quite as good, but almost. All right? I prefer Chick-fil-A. But it took them forever to give me my sandwich, and I'm easygoing, so I'm like, whatever. It's okay. I realize you have other customers here. Well, the lady said, no, I'm going to give you a coupon. And so at the point she gives me a coupon, I have to receive the coupon. It's a free chicken sandwich. It's great. You know, I can get the same thing over again without having to pay any money. So it's kind of like I buy one, get one free. But you know, if I didn't take the coupon, I don't get the free chicken sandwich. Well, God is giving us a coupon, in a sense, through Jesus Christ. And we have to take it in order to use it. And it's saying in this that he had, in his forbearance, he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He's saying that, you know what, it's not just offered to those who came after Christ. It's offered to all those who had come before him. It's offered to Abraham and to Isaac and to Moses and to all those guys. So that his justice may be demonstrated at the time of the cross. At the time where the penalty of sin was paid by Jesus. So he is just because everybody has to pay the penalty, and everybody is given a chance to use the coupon. So not only is he just, but he's the justifier. Because he's the coupon that's making things go to the black. And so, to think about that, in Luke 16, Jesus talks about a man who died, and he was wealthy, but he didn't really live a good life, and he goes to this place of torment, and this beggar named Lazarus dies, and he goes to the bosom of Abraham. It was believed by the Jewish people of his time that when we died, we didn't go to heaven or hell. We went to a place where we waited. And it was a foretaste of what heaven or hell would be like. And so what he's saying is that no, before Christ, people waited for Christ to come in the bosom of Abraham, or in this place of torment that the rich guy was in. And when Jesus Christ came down and he gave the sacrifice and he paid the penalty, all those in the bosom of Abraham were justified. And they were in the bosom of Abraham because they had faith. Not because they did this and not because they did that, but because they had faith. That's what that last bit goes on to say. Look, no, it is on faith, right? It is justified by faith apart from observing the law. In verse 28, there is only one God who will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through the same faith. See, it's all through faith. Even the Old Testament saints, it was through faith in the coming Messiah. And for us, it's through faith in the Messiah who has come. And he is coming again. And so it says in this last part, do we then nullify the law by this faith? And Paul says, not at all. Rather, we uphold the law by it. Remember, the law called for the death. That was the punishment. And through this faith, we pay that punishment through Jesus Christ. We pay that punishment by being covered in his blood, by being hid within the cleft of the rock of ages. That punishment is paid. Will you bow with me in prayer?